Hi, so I'm Maria Salgado in the Intro to Business doing my final video post, final one for the second half of the semester. Can't believe we're this far. This is the only thing I have left. It's the last thing and I'm done. Done. Well, at least with this semester. So, this second half of the semester was, I really enjoyed a little bit more than the previous half, the first 8 weeks, just because it was a little bit more of the stuff I'm a little bit more interested in. Like for, chapters 13 through 21. For example, chapter 17 was one that I really enjoyed because it talks all about like the accounting, the annual reports, stuff that I'm a little bit more familiar with, but I also want to learn more about. So, accounting is the recording, classifying, summarizing, and interpreting of financial events and transactions in an organization to provide management and other interested parties the financial information they need to make good decisions about its operation. So, what I would like to do and get my bachelor's on is actually accounting. So it was like a really good chapter for me where I got to learn a little bit more about what I'm interested in. I mean, business has to do a lot with accounting as well, whether you're going to own your own firm, you're going to get your own firm and open your own accounting firm, or, working for another business, and just kind of, it's always good to know the background of how businesses starts and all that good stuff. But yeah, so as I was reading through, I was able to kind of connect with a lot of these topics and find a connection and say, oh yeah, I do that, or oh yeah, I've seen that in my QuickBooks. So one of the things is like managerial accounting, which is when, you provide information and now kind of like an analysis report to managers so that, they know like for their planning and controlling. So this part I can really connect with, just because in my manager meetings, every kind of quarter, which is like every 3 months for me, like January through March, April through June, July through October, November through December. Yeah. I try to kind of give a report to my managers because I think it's very important that they're aware of the organization and that they're aware of where their spending is, and that they're aware of, whether they're kind of, I don't want to say whether they're making a profit, because that's kind of like more for me to know, but also for them to know, so they know like, okay, maybe I've been spending too much on X, Y, and Z, because I give my managers kind of like a little bit of a liberty. So we're a restaurant, so they order food based on what they think they're going to need that week. And they know how many customers they get in and how busy they are on a regular basis. And then when holidays come, they might order a little bit more because they get more busy, or they might order a little bit less because they don't get as busy. It varies at each restaurant. It really does. And I give my managers that liberty to kind of plan and control and just, say, okay, this is what I'm going to purchase for food and packaging and all operating supplies and all that good stuff. So that was a big one for me because, I never really thought about it until I started reading this. You do this stuff, but you never really think about it, and you never think about the impact, and you never think about, the other, what they're thinking, and, so I give them those, I guess, kind of profit and loss statements on, were they profitable this month? Did they lose money? Are they overspending? Or did they have a huge, change in net sales, or a huge change in how much food they lost? You know, there's times when we have so many people training at once that the food cost and how much food is being lost is like high. And that's when I go and show him, and he's like, oh yeah, you know, and maybe I need to go back and retrain these employees, because this is the month where I had 5 new employees, and I'm pretty sure food was probably lost because they're over portioning, or, you know, it's just getting tossed, or they're just not doing it how they're supposed to. So yeah, so that's good. So, you know, one of the things is that I do try to use the principles when talking to especially to my managers, because that's who I have a little bit more contact with. So, for example, Principle 9, be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Principle 10, appeal to nobler motives. Principle 11, dramatize your ideas. And Principle 12, throw down a challenge. I think all these can relate back to the whole profit and loss statements, managerial accounting, just because I can tell them, like, okay, you know, this last month I realized your net sales weren't as, you know, weren't as good, but your food cost and how much money you purchase and how much money you used to purchase food was like way high. So you need to make sure you watch out for that. Like, I've had new managers who just over, you know, purchase because they don't want to run out of anything, which I'm like, okay, yeah, you know, I don't want you to run out of anything. I don't want you to be to the last fork or to the last spoon, last napkin. No. But I also don't want you to, you know, over purchase and have, you know, napkins for the next 3 months. That's just not ideal. And, you know, money, if the money doesn't need to be spent in that moment, then we don't need to do that right now. So, you know, I throw down a challenge. I let them know, okay, this is what I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on cutting back on how many napkins you're purchasing. Or, you know, I'm sympathetic with their ideas, and I ask them, where do you think you're going wrong? And, you know, what do you think happened this last month? And so, yeah, so I really liked this chapter, you know, annual reports, you know, taxes. Taxes are so much fun, especially for a business. Yeah, so, you know, auditing, you know, we recently got audited by a work comp, which wasn't like a big deal. Just kind of handed over a couple papers. We did get audited by the Idaho sales tax. That one was a big deal, and it was like months. It was like, took us like 3 months to get through the whole audit. And, you know, everything went well, but yeah, so I was able to kind of get like an idea and all that good stuff, and the ledger, which I use QuickBooks. So once they were talking about QuickBooks in the book, and I was like, oh yeah, QuickBooks, I use QuickBooks, you know, that's where I run my balance sheet, my income statements, you know, that's where I enter all my assets in, my fixed assets, my intangible assets. That's where I make my budgets, and I look at how, you know, what our spending is, what our profit and loss, what our financial statements are over that period. You know, I really like to look at, what is it? The balance sheets. You know, I like to look at them as what you owe, what you own, and what you're worth. Because that's really what they are, you know. They're how much money you own, how much cash you have, how many assets you have, whether, you know, it's food, inventory, equipment, you know, depreciation of equipment. At the end of the year, how much has the equipment depreciated, and then that's a loss. And so, yeah, so, you know, this last tax season, I was sitting with my accountant, and she was like, okay, so these are all your assets, this is your depreciation. And I was kind of like, I kind of have an idea, but not really. I'm still kind of like questionable about it. Like, okay, what am I looking at? What am I looking at? So this chapter was also like a learning experience for me, just because I was able to learn a little bit more on, you know, what am I looking at when I look at these tax forms or balance sheets or whatever. You know, I know what I'm looking at on my balance sheet and my profit and loss statements, just not so much, you know, tax forms. And when she tells me like, okay, so bottom line, you made X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, wait, so in QuickBooks, why is it X, Y, and Z? And she's like, oh, depreciation. And I'm like, okay. And then, I kind of like think about it and ask her what it really is. And yeah. But yeah, so all that stuff and, stocks, shares of ownership in company, and that one, stock certificate, and that one was pretty, I was able to connect with because I have my own stock certificate for stocks and stuff. I just never thought about it. I guess, this is what I like about this class, is that it brings up like background information, how it all began, and how credit unions started, and how banks started, and what the Fed requires for banks to do, and all that good stuff. And taxes, how they're the way the federal, state, and local governments raise money. And as when tax season comes, I'm just like, tax season. But I never stop and think about it, that this is how our local governments raise money, and the federal, and the state, and all that stuff. And this is how they fix the roads. When the snowstorm hit 2 years ago, that this is all what they're doing with all of our money. I hope they are, but this is what they're doing with our money, is they're fixing these roads. And my personal taxes, and then my business taxes, everything I paid from the business is also going into the governments, and them fixing, building parks, building public schools, building the simplest things. But yeah, that's what our taxes are going for. And it was just like kind of like eye-opening for me to look at some of these things that I never really thought about. I always thought about them as like, I have to do them, but I've never thought about them like, okay, so why do I have to do them? Why am I doing this again? Or so yeah, so that's why I really enjoyed this second half. And then something I enjoyed from the book as well, because the book, I've never read it, but now I'm kind of like, okay, I want everyone to read it. Like, I'm just like, have you read How to Win Friends book? Have you read that book? Like, I'm gonna go purchase it, and I think I'm gonna go purchase a couple paper copies, like for some of my management team and my work team, so that they can start reading it, because I think everyone should read that. If you're in the business, I think you should be reading this book. And for example, like it does the principles. So another couple of the principles that stood out to me was like principle 3, 4, 5, and 6, which was talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person, ask questions instead of giving direct orders, let the other person say phase, praise the slightest improvement. So like I said before, you don't really think about that you have to do these things, but when you start reading about it, or kind of getting the other person's like point of view, you kind of start realizing like, wait a minute, have I been doing this, or have I been following these principles? Because it gives you a scenario for each principle, and it really does make all that difference, because it's like, okay, so have I been doing this? And I realized I've actually been doing this. Like, I try to not to save face, I guess. I try not to put my employer or manager like on the spot and just say, you did this completely wrong. Like, what are you doing? No, like I try to tell them about like, oh, in the past I've done this, what are you doing? Or, in the past I would get it wrong, and I would count the money wrong, and I would always forget that we have the coin machine that we need to count. And then they start thinking about it, and then they're kind of like, so last night I forgot to count the coin machine. And then I'm like, that's what I was looking for. And so yeah, so I guess that's kind of like the save phase. And then I'm like, okay, well, as long as you remember and you resend, that your cash wasn't short last night and all that good stuff. But yeah, so it's been a really good semester, you know, this is the last video, and I hope you're able to see everything that I've learned. I've learned a lot, and I've learned things that I never really actually thought about, you know, like the principles, some of the like smallest things that you just never stop and think about, you know, to dramatize your ideas, throw down a challenge. You know, I've never thought about, you know, if I do or don't do that. And I realized I do it, but now I'm trying to think, okay, like how can I better at that as a, you know, as a manager? How do I be better at doing what I'm doing? And, you know, all these long words, annual reports, audits, ledgers, all that good stuff. You know, I see it every day, and I'm doing it every day. I just never really stop and think about it, and think about, you know, how did it all start? You know, who started banks and why? And it's all really interesting stuff, and I really enjoyed it. But yeah, so I hope you like my video. Thank you.